Hey everyone, it's Eric Bartley again with another in our series of videos along overcoming obstacles. A little different one today. I want to remind someone that the obstacles that you face are not final. I say that again. The obstacle that you may be facing in your life, it's not final. It's not the end. Time hasn't run out for you. There's still hope. I was told pretty much my whole life when I first started getting in church that as long as there's life, there's hope. As long as you're still breathing, there's hope. The obstacle that you're facing is not final. It's not the end. It's just a roadblock. It's just something that's going to cause you to have to alter your path, modify along the way, make some different decisions, step back and analyze, am I doing everything that I know that I'm supposed to be doing? But it's not final. Oftentimes we look at obstacles as maybe a failure of some part. But I want to remind someone today that failure, and it's not my original phrase, I'm using it and I'm quoting several different people along the way, but failure is not a person. Failure is an event. You are not a failure. Just because you come up against an obstacle, just because you have run into a roadblock along the way, doesn't mean that you're a failure. The only time that you actually fail is when you fall down and you don't get back up. But if you fall down and you stub your toe, you skin the palm of your hands, whatever it is that you run into along the way, physically, spiritually, financially, relationship-wise, health-wise, whatever it is, the only time that you actually fail is when you fall down and you don't get back up. So the obstacle that you're facing is not final. It's not the end. And just because you may look at it as a failure, just because you may have failed in the past, and I realize I'm kind of weaving the two together there, but sometimes we look at our obstacles as failures. I know I've been guilty of that in the past. When I run up against something that's causing me to not be able to move ahead, something that's causing me to not be able to move into what I really want to move into, I view it sometimes as a failure, something that I messed up, somehow that I didn't do something right. It was my fault that we got into this situation, or whatever the case may be. But you got to realize that just because we fail, and we will, we're gonna fall down, we're gonna stumble, but just because we fail, just because we fall down, the only time we're absolutely a failure is when we just quit trying. So I also want us to think about, back to the reference of it's not final. Think of an obstacle that you faced 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Just go back in your memory and think of some different obstacles along the way that you may have faced, some different times of adversity that came up into your life, and then with hindsight, turn around and look back at them. When you look back with hindsight, they seem pretty small. I remember driving to the University of Idaho in my car headed back to college, and we come up, I believe it was called Whitebird Hill, outside of Lewiston, Idaho, I believe. My memory's a little bit fuzzy, but I think that's what it was called. And I remember at the base of that hill looking up at that thing, it was like, I don't know, 50% grade. It wasn't. It was 10, 12, 7, 8, some high grade percentage of the road. And it was windy, back and forth for 10, 12 miles. I'm not sure how far it was. But when you're at the bottom of this thing looking up, it looked like it was an insurmountable obstacle. It seemed as if that was possibly the end of the journey, especially for my car. It seemed like it was maybe the end of my journey along the way. But then whenever I turned around and I looked back down the hill, I realized it wasn't as bad as what I thought. You know, I say it quite often, and hear me, today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday. Now think about that. Yesterday you were fearful of today. You were afraid of the obstacles of today. You were afraid of all the things you were going to face today. You spent a lot of time, some of us, a lot of time worrying about today. And then we get to today, and what do? We realize that maybe it's not as bad as what I thought it was. I'm actually going to live. I'm going to make it through this day. And so we start worrying about tomorrow. So let me say it again. Today is the tomorrow you worried about yesterday. I want you to understand, when you come up against an obstacle in your life, it's not final. You're not a failure. God knows who you are. He knows where you are. And He knows what's going on. So sometimes we got to look at those obstacles, reframe them, have a little fun with them, find a way to go around them, modify our path a little bit, decide, did I do this to myself? But we got to realize that in hindsight, it's going to be mighty small. We're going to be able to make it through us. Now let me throw one more thing into you, and I just thought of this. The scripture tells us, I don't have the exact reference because I'm kind of shooting from the hip, coming off the top of my head here, but the scripture tells us that God speaking in the Old Testament, that He said, I knew you, and I believe He was referring to Joel, maybe Jeremiah, but I want to say Joel. He said, I knew you before you were even formed in the womb. Think about that. Before you even existed, God knew who you were. If He knows who you are before you exist, You can't tell me that He's going to leave you staring at some obstacle, wondering how in the world I'm going to get around this thing and feel like I'm a failure and that it's final. So today, get up, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and realize that the obstacles that you face right now in your life, they're not final. You're going to be able to look back 6 months down the road, year down the road, 5 years down the road, and realize, you know what? I made it through that also. God was good to me, and I came through. God bless you, and I hope this helps you today.